So what happened, in my opinion, is just a manifestation of the legacy of white supremacy and capitalism. Right? That's what we're looking at, in my opinion. Right? It manifests in different ways at different times in different places, but this is what we're looking at right now, and this is what we're fighting, in my opinion. So I wanted to start off with what actually happened. Right? In the press, they talk about these cops being there, these kids showing up and just everything going crazy. Right? I'm sure a lot of people in this room know that that's not actually the case. Right? Allegedly, there was this meme going around on Facebook or Twitter about the purge. Right? There's going to be a purge like the movie. Right? And because the cops are like, well, everything on the internet is true, they decided to amass, right, outside of Frederick Douglass by Montgomery Mall, right? So they shut down the station, the buses, the train, where kids were supposed to go home, right? And then the kids come out of school, they're kind of like, what in the hell can we do? The cops started advancing on groups of kids in like 3 and 4, right? And then the kids are like, you know, what the hell? How are we gonna get home? You know, so after all this intimidation and frustration and confusion about what to do, some of the kids just popped off, you know. So that's kind of the context for what went down. And it begs the question, what would have happened if the cops had not closed the station? If the cops had not had everybody get off the buses, had not locked everything down? So then the kids are coming out of school, so let's talk about the school system, right? I used to teach high school about, wow, I left 10 years ago, so it's kind of crazy. 85% of students in some high schools are on free and reduced lunch, right? So when they closed the schools, that meant that some of the kids would not be able to get food, right, for that day, all right? You also see this background, this dynamic where Governor Hogan wants to cut $35 million from the budget of Baltimore City schools, right? At the same time, you have these large institutions like these casinos and whatnot coming up all over the place, and they get these sweetheart tax breaks where they don't have to pay taxes for decades in some instances, right? So this is the backdrop, this is the schools that these kids are coming out of. On the other hand, you have these fights, right? Like they're trying to build a youth jail in Baltimore, and students came together and they fought it and they won, right? So it's not all, you know, terrible all the time. There's young people who are organizing and fighting to make things better. Another side of the coin is housing. You know, a lot of places are terrible. There's a lot of people constantly getting eviction notices. They go to rent court. When they go to rent court, they're facing judges who tell them to go outside with their landlords. Their landlords are intimidating them because they have agents who aren't actually the landlords for these companies that are managing the properties. And they're just like, you need to do this, you need to do that. Oftentimes not even telling the truth. So these people wind up feeling like, my back is against the wall, I don't want to lose where I live, so I got to cough up this money that I don't even have. On top of that, recently, they started these water shutoffs for 25,000 people across the city, right? So these are all the conditions that this stuff is coming out of, right? The last thing I wanted to, redlining. Some of you all got a copy of the map that I passed around, right? So, are a lot of people familiar with the practice of redlining? Redlining? Okay, pretty educated. So for those that aren't aware, redlining is a practice of isolating the black community in different cities and saying that no loans should be given to those people who live in those communities. No investment should be made in those communities, right? So you have the Federal Housing Authority back in the day make that code, right? They codified it, they said nobody should be investing in these communities across the country in all these cities, right? To the point that some realtors, if they did, they would lose their license, right? So none of this stuff is by happenstance. If you look at the map, you can see there's an arrow, and that's pointing to Sandtown, Winchester, where Freddie Gray got killed, where he's from. All right, so it's still like that, right? So I stopped calling these things ghettos and hoods. I started calling them economically sabotaged communities, right? Because that's actually what's going on. Healthcare. So I spent some time in the protest as a street medic. I have a little bit of background in paramedicine, and healthcare in general. When I was riding the volunteer ambulances, I would see person after person who didn't have health insurance, who was using the emergency room as their primary care physician, right? Situation after situation, people would be in states where they couldn't ignore the pain anymore. They couldn't ignore the problem, they had to go in, and by that case, sometimes the disease process would be pretty far along, and they might not be able to reverse it, right? So if all these factors had not been what they are, if access to health care had been adequate, if housing had been adequate, if schools had been decent, if the cops hadn't, been on Facebook, I don't know, then it's obvious, in my opinion, that we wouldn't be here right now today, because things would be a lot better, So, yeah, I'll start there.
Oh. All right.
All right, so I'm Makayla Gilliam-Price. Once again, I'm a 17-year-old who goes to Baltimore City College High School in Baltimore. Oh, I'll yell. Should I stand up too?
Yeah.
Okay, that's chill. And you can excuse my voice if it starts cracking because I'm yelling. I was yelling at the top of my lungs at the student protest yesterday. So excuse me. And excuse me if I'm looking down at my book a lot, it's just that my job is to represent students, and so with me I have a lot of stories of students that I make sure that I'm representing accurately here, and that all of the voices of the kids that I represent are accurately heard and told. So I'll start with my story. Like what was stated earlier, my uncle is Tyrone Gilliam, and he was executed by the state wrongly, as is anyone who loses their life in an unjust situation. And his last words were, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," and that's truly what I stand by, and what I live by, and what I march by every day when I'm in the streets protesting. And a lot of interviewers ask me daily, they're like, well, why did you get involved? How did you get involved in student organizing? Why did you want to be at the forefront of these movements, right? And it's like, how could I not be, right? Because you grow up, right, and you see kids that have the same story, right? You see the sisters and little cousins of Freddie Gray, a man who was executed by the state, right? We have the children who were raised in broken homes whose spirits were in some way executed by the state, right? We see black girls who don't see the God in them, right? Whose esteem was executed by the state. We have black girls and black boys every day in school systems whose futures are executed by the state, just like my uncle, right? And we're always told, forgive them, right? Forgive them, excuse them, right? But it's not time for forgiveness, right? It's not time for excusing the ignorance that's been placed around us. Then this question comes up again, right? How could I not be involved? It's so inevitable that every student, every youth leader in every community should be involved in this movement that we just have to be engaged in, right? Like, we are the generation who are the Facebook revolutionaries and Twitter journalists for our own communities and peers, right? We are the generation who are tired of waiting for that torch to be passed, but it never is passed, right? We are fed up with complacency. We're fed up with these reactionary politics that we only are in the streets after a black man has been killed, right? But never when a black woman has been killed. We're tired of, even when we do go out into the streets to protest, we're met with nominal leaders who capitalize off of our struggles, who exploit the movement, who literally walk around with their Twitter handles printed on their shirts, right? This is the most literal example of how our black community has internalized this whiteness, this racism that says that we don't deserve better, right? And for me to not harness that greatness, that potential, that strength, that power that all of the kids in Baltimore have within them already would be a sin, right? And so I sat down with the students in my community and we said, well, what is the problem, right? Why is nothing getting changed? Why do we keep sitting at murder after murder and we protest for about a week, right? Talk about how we only protested about a week, 2 weeks later, and then that's the end, right? And so what we said is that we're not contextualizing these instances of racism and white supremacy in our daily lives, right? It's that we're using these instances and using them as symbols, right? And what's really dangerous and problematic about that is that once we tie a murder of a black man or a black woman down as just one instance of whiteness and racism, we say that once we solve that one instance, it's over, right? The fight's done, right? But if we start asking why, if we start contextualizing these instances of racism where our brothers and sisters are being killed daily, right? When we say, well, why was he killed? Okay, yes, he was running away from the police, but why was he running away, right? And we start asking why, then we get to the root of our problems. We get to see that this is not just a day-to-day instance, it's our lives, right? It's our government, it's our country. This is the system that we were forced to live in, right? And so what the students of Baltimore City College did was we hosted a sit-in and we talked about all of this. We had an open forum for kids to voice their concerns, and that's the most powerful way to hear the concerns of the community. Just let that raw rage, that raw passion, those raw emotions speak for themselves. And what we did with that is that we hosted a walkout where we led over 100 students out of our high school and down to North Avenue, right? And people are saying, well, in the wake of the movement that's about police brutality, why are you walking to North Avenue, your school's headquarters, right? What does this have to do with the educational system, right? And it's all about that contextualization, right? This is not just a genocide that's happening on the streets, right? This is a genocide that's happening daily in our schools. It's a genocide that's happening daily spiritually. It's a genocide that's happening daily mentally and psychologically. This is a fight that needs to be fought on all fronts, right? It's about that multifaceted approach. That's what's going to get us a solution. The most recent student action was yesterday, where we led hundreds and hundreds of students on the streets of Baltimore from Penn Station, the train station in Baltimore, to City Hall, where we demanded that our rights be heard. We had demands like amending the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, demanding for a civilian review board that has actual teeth, and that we're over this reactionary politics once again, and that we're having police meetings with the police officers, 75% of which do not come from our communities, right? So that they can be held accountable to the communities that they're serving, right? And these are the demands that students have in their minds already. We see these instances that aren't okay, that are unjust every day, but we're not harnessing the potential that's behind them, right? And what I need us to do is to stop, as teacher allies or adult allies, if you have students or children, I need you to never harass your students, right? Never ask your students why they're doing something. Never question their intentions. Never question where they're going. Never say, you know, that's dangerous, right? Because we all know. We all know the risk that we're putting our lives in. We all know the risk that we're putting our futures in. But we're saying that it's worth it, right? And I'm asking all of you to respect the youth struggle, to respect the fact that all of us are willing to risk our lives, our futures, that college scholarship we're willing to, right? And I need you all to stand behind that movement, and I need you all to fight with us.
Right on.
Good luck, Gary.
I went to City College too.
City forever.
It's just that I graduated before she was born. I can't follow that, you know, but I'll do my best. And this is not a competition anyway. I remember I wrote a bunch of positive stuff on a blackboard in one of the stations one time, and one of them was like cooperation over competition. And, you know, stuff about kindness and love. It was erased in short order. Talk louder, okay. Just briefly, I was born in '53 in Baltimore, and I was raised 2 miles from where this occurred. I was raised at Baker and Rosedale. And This is physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual for me. I was raised by a single mom. I'm the father of 4 children. I'm the grandfather of 1 granddaughter who's 18 years old. And she wants to be a journalist. And you journalists out there, y'all know, well, all of us know how often journalists are being killed. And yet, I want her to go right up there to Penn State and study with Randall Robinson. So I'm gonna cut to the chase, beginning with what was happening in the firehouse. Most of you know I'm to the left of Karl Marx. And, you know, I'm always the object of alienation and derision because of my views. I do not hold my tongue. I've been going around with an upside-down flag hanging from my driver's window for the last 4 months. I've been stopped by soldiers, and then when I explained to them, they're like, yeah, you're right, you know. The enmity in the firehouse is palpable, but that's always been the case. And you know, a friend of mine gave me a supreme compliment a few weeks ago, one of my coworkers, because I'm known for not holding my tongue. I try not to fight every battle. And he said, when you get Gary, you get straight no chaser. And so in the firehouse, one of my coworkers is estranged from his wife, but his wife's a police officer. And you guys know that there were several officers that were hurt. And things started being stirred up. They started spiraling out of control early because it's me trying to support the viewpoints of the people against the so-called liberal media and the weight of numbers. So that was early on. I mean, one of my 26-year-old co-workers said the word riot that morning. I did not think it was going to happen. And of course, I was proven wrong. But the guy, my coworker, who was a good friend of mine, that I've known for 15 years, he stepped across the line. You know, in my job, you can't accuse somebody being a coward. And he inferred that I was a coward. I've been doing this job for almost 25 years. I'm part of the dive rescue team. You know, if you're a coward, you have to believe me. You can't go 30 feet under in dark water at 3 o'clock in the morning. Look for a body. Apart from going into burning buildings, okay? So, you know, it was an escalation of emotions and tension within the firehouse. And then we got a fire that was not associated with the rebellion, with the revolution that's been ongoing for quite some time. Quite as it's kept, this has been going on for centuries. Please read some Gerald Horne, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, and Racial Revolution about Cuba and the United States. So the fires, you know, the first fire we had was up in the Northwest, and I mean, fire is, fighting fire is, it's like you have to give everything you got. If you're worth your salt, it's not like playing a game. You have to, you know, I was totally exhausted at least a dozen times Monday going into Tuesday. Just in case I forgot to tell you, I worked 24 hours that day. I started at 6 a.m. I actually got to work before 6 a.m. and I didn't finish until about 6:30 a.m. the next day. But the, and you know, we still had EMS calls. We still had other calls. So tiredness is an understatement. We were going to, I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit because I have it in a certain order. That way I can stay on message. I'll never forget going across Fulton Avenue and North Avenue. We were going to the fire at Baker and Mount. And we have in our rules and regs now that we have to stop at every red light and we have to stop at every stop sign. But at the corner of Fulton and North, there were about 100, 150 guys, and you know, mostly guys. And so there's a red light. A minor amount of pelting started, but as I slowed down even more to stop, it increased. Both of our windshields, you know, it was like 2 separate windshields. Both of them were busted. We were pelted with rocks, maybe a couple bricks, bottles, cans. But I was strangely satisfied for some reason because earlier, you know, there were a couple times when all the guys in the firehouse, they're laughing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let's see if you continue laughing, you know? Because when they talk trash, you know, it's like, yeah, you're in the firehouse, but this is my community. You're in the minority here, right? So as we were being pelted, and believe you me, if that window had been down, maybe a rock could have hit me in the head and killed me, you know? But I felt like I had an invisible force field around me. I was like strangely at peace. I got goosebumps just talking about it. So we went to that fire, but I'll come back to that fire. The Smallwood and North Avenue fire that I was at, it was actually a hair place right across the street, you know, with the extensions and all that stuff, right? And all the hair products. So our females can make their hair look white, okay? Now, I mean, I remember, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, and trying to get into the natural and stuff. I'm not denigrating anybody. I'm just saying this is part of the sickness when one standard of beauty is held above another. They were in there looting, as we were fighting the fire across the street. There was a SWAT wagon not 30 yards away, but fortunately, they obviously had orders not to fire on people. And then I'm going to jump over to Baker and Mount, where fire was up blowing. It was a two-story, formerly a business that had been transferred into a home. Fire blowing out of the first and second floor. We were already tired. I mean, there was at least 25 fires in Baltimore City Monday going into Tuesday. So the responses were delayed. There was a danger that the fire was going to walk down the entire side of the block. We were talking about 15 homes. A la maybe like, you know, let the fire burn up, and in Philly, some might remember 1984 up at 69th and Osage. But this is different, of course, all right? But the most poignant aspect of that fire for me is the story of a woman. I'd run out of air in my bottle, my compressed air, and we were told once we ran out of air to come out. Of course, the guys were still doing their jobs because that's what we do. I mean, you just give everything you got because you want to make sure that you're not made an object of derision and alienation. And you just want to do your job, you know. It's like on our patches, it says pride protecting people. I've pointed to that patch at least 10,000 times and said the words. But there was this woman, when I was taking my backpack off, who was crying like nobody's business. And so I went over to her, and she said, how's my house? It's the red brick house. And I had been in there, you know, looking for the fire, poking holes in the ceiling. Fortunately, there was no fire had walked into her dwelling. And but she couldn't look at me. All she could look at was her house. I mean, she's got, you know, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in there. And quiet as kept. And you know, they might call it the ghetto, but those, you know, a lot of those people put in tens of thousands of dollars into their homes, right? Those homes that I went into at Baker and Mount, all those homes were like #1, believe me. #1 homes, all right? But I said, you know, I took my gloves off. I said, let me hold your hands. And then she let me hold her hands. You know, I was dirty too. I said, look in my eyes. I said, look, we're going to do our best. We're doing our best. Your home is pretty much okay except for the holes in the ceiling. We're doing our best. And then we went about the process of dotting I's, crossing T's. We got to make sure we don't get a rekindle and have to come back, okay? But we want, you know, people's safety is #1. So we're putting up to leave, and then I see her again, but now she's carrying an 18-month-old baby, or thereabouts, you know, and so I went over to her, and, you know, the baby was just looking at me. It was just a moment, you know what I mean? A couple of medic calls, and we had one last fire, like 3:30 a.m. Somebody tried to set this guy's fence on fire, like 2000 block of North Payson. just not far from where all this, the epicenter is. And, we were able to put the fire out by stomping on it and just using a water extinguisher, because ladder trucks, that's all the water we carry. Otherwise we have to get it from the water pumper and stuff like that. And, it was like fighting those fires was like, I used to play football. You probably got some soccer players, some basketball players, whatever. But it was like playing 3 football games back to back. And as somebody that's almost 62 years old, you can imagine how much my body hurt. And the next day, because of like flat out dehydration, I slept for 10 hours straight. Man, I was in heaven really, because I have to get up and go to the bathroom like 4 or 5 times a night, So that really, it was like one of the benefits, strange enough, And I know you old guys can feel me out there. I know you can feel me, right? Remember bucket list, old man can't pass up a bathroom, right? But, the big picture. The big picture is, I was with Eddie Conway yesterday on a panel with the Real News Network. I've been the beneficiary of being with him like 4 or 5 times since he got out of prison after being in prison. Wrongly, 44 years, wrongly convicted like Mumia Abu Jamal of killing a police officer. I encourage you to read his book that I have here, Martial Law, The Life and Times of a Baltimore Panther. I read the first 13 pages today, including the prologue. What he wrote then is just as pertinent right this moment. And in conclusion, part of the big pictures, and part of the thing is you'll see in his book, The Greatest Threat, which the Panthers were called by J. Edgar Hoover, and COINTELPRO and the war against the Panthers for having free lunch programs and free breakfast programs and stuff like that. Well, we know why they were a threat, all right? Because they were a threat to the status quo, the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, and those are Bell Hook's words, those are not my words. But agents provocateur are always part of the mix. You guys know this, okay? Citizen 4, Chelsea Manning, I could go on, all right? And please help get Mumia some medical help here, all right?
And without further ado, I'll hand it back to Kevin Wheeler. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Wheeler. I'm a worker, not intellectual. I've never did very well in school, although I love to learn. Sure. I'm a worker. Worker pretty much means I don't really care too much about political understandings about certain things. I see something that needs to be done and I do it, pretty much as simple as that. I've never been very good at explaining very complex things. I've just pretty much try and learn as much as I can and put one step in front of the other. And one thing that I understood that everybody kept trying to make very complex was that it didn't matter how smart I was, it didn't matter how good I was at certain things, there was a role placed for me before I was even born. I didn't necessarily know what that role was when I was younger because I was never very good at sports. I was very shy. I was always very respectful towards everyone. I didn't go into the stereotypes which would really make me angry of how my classmates and the people I grew up around, who are so much more varied, so much more complex, had so much more dignity. But in order to exist within this system, you have to stereotype yourself. You have to. Anybody that says that they don't, they have either been able to create their own subsection, which in and of itself still works within the greater capitalism's whole. You can't exist without capitalism unless you're on an island, and that shit's gonna last for like maybe a month, 2 months. So pretty much, I learned early on that most of the stereotypes I had didn't apply to me. So where did I fit in? And I felt very, very awkward about it. But one thing I learned was that if I just put myself to it and didn't think so much, I could pretty much do a good job. And I decided after I met a lot of the people who are here, especially Kevin and Alana, exactly what the type of work I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that the people that I grew up with, that my family, my friends, would have the chance to do whatever they want, and they would never have to be put into a role that they didn't choose for themselves. That became more important to me than anything else. And working with the union, I became a union member at Unite Here Local 7. I had one of the worst jobs in the world. I worked at BWI at On-Site News, 7th Circle of Hell, one of the worst experiences of my life. And when you work in that type of environment, when you're a cashier, pretty much giving people goods, the sense of entitlement that comes through, that is transmitted towards you, is very hard to bear, especially for someone that kind of sees through it, like, that kind of sees exactly where all the money that people pay for these tickets is going to. It's not even actually to make it a better ride, for it to be a safe ride. It's so that they can buy more planes, so they can have more seats, so they can get more of your money. And but while I was there, one thing I learned more than anything else was that it didn't matter where somebody was from. Everybody pretty much got angry about the same thing, and that was the lack of respect and lack of power. And working with Unite Here, working through all the struggles of the airport, I don't know how familiar people are with it, but we've been trying to organize. That place was union at one time, and everybody had decent health care. They were respected on the job. They found a way around it like they always do by breaking up the companies and having one company manage all of them. So now people are making minimum wage or less, have to work 2 or 3 jobs. Most of them don't live close, so they live in the city, Baltimore City, and they travel 2 hours to get there to be sexually harassed, told that, oh, well, you come from Baltimore, you can only do so much, maybe you're not management material. For me to become a bartender with no experience, and my friend Kareem, who's struggling right now, who had 9 years of bartending experience, but because he had long dreads and darker skin, he was excluded from that position, and I was giving it to me, and I was like, no, wait a minute, why are we not letting Kareem have a chance to have the type of job he's qualified for? It's always the same situation of, well, you know, I just don't feel like he has the social skills. I don't think he has the skills after 9 fucking years of doing the job in order to do it for this company. So our union has a lot of problems, like every union. But at least we fight for the people that are there. We fight for them. We fight for our community. You know, we were out there when Michael Brown was killed, Tyrone West. We were out there for Freddie Gray. But there are other entities that disguise themselves as unions, that pretty much say that they are fighting for their workers, their workers being the people who are actively killing the people we're fighting for, who are using their power in order to protect the people who did this heinous crime. They're saying that the people protesting on the street are lynch mobs, appropriating that word, which has a real connotation for people like me, for people like Makayla, and Miss Gilliam and Kevin, and all the other allies who are out there, pretty much using it as against the people who want to make sure that their children can actually have a future. And I'm supposed to, as a union member, recognize that as someone that is my brother or sister? No, I refuse. It's very simple. Like, my father used to tell me all the time, you're either in it or you ain't. There's no in between. So it seemed like God or whatever decided that I was going to be in this fight when I was born. I don't know why. I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that I can stand with my city and feel so proud. And I was, you know, when we were at the riots and things started popping off, it felt good to see people who had never been to a protest before, maybe had only heard about it, confronting police, confronting them. When police would push forward, would put their hands up to outsmarting them, showing them pretty much, we're just gonna make you feel exactly what you are. And if you try and use your authority, your ultimate authority against us, you're gonna have to do it in front of the entire world. And it showed the power of these students, these young people that they're called thugs, but I think everybody understands what they really are. They just don't want to say it. What does that say about the system that created that anger? So, I'm a worker, I'm gonna keep going to work.
Alana, like Mike said, I'm a socialist who's been living in Baltimore for the past almost 15 years. You know, Kevin mentioned a statement put out by the police so-called union, the Fraternal Order of Police, calling protesters, comparing protesters to a lynch mob. Another statement that they made in that same letter was, we're not concerned with the community's confidence in our investigation. And that says right there pretty much everything you need to know about the relationship between the police and the people of Baltimore. They're not concerned if we're confident in their investigation. They don't care if we feel confident that they're doing their job at all. And I was so angry. I mean, I was angry about the lynch mob comment, of course, on so many levels. But that comment too, it says it all about the relationship that's not new, that goes back through the history of Baltimore. And the morning after the riots, I got up and I just started sobbing, thinking about the word city. Because even though it's something I knew intellectually, you know, I read A Tale of Two Cities like everybody, like of course, every city is a tale of two cities. But just thinking about the fact, I often say I love Baltimore. Lots of people who look like me say they love Baltimore. But I didn't really realize until that morning that when I say I love Baltimore, I'm talking about something completely different than a whole lot of other people. I'm talking about the people who live in Baltimore. I'm talking about my friends. I'm talking about communities, neighborhoods. I'm talking about, I'm a social worker. I'm thinking of clients that I work with who are struggling with homelessness and mental illness and HIV. I'm thinking about struggle, really. And I think about the left in Baltimore. I think about all kinds of different organizations doing all kinds of different work in Baltimore. That's what I mean when I say that I love Baltimore. And then I realized after that night, a lot of people, when they say they love Baltimore, they mean Orioles Stadium. They mean the bars. They mean something, they're talking about buildings, literally. And it just, I couldn't believe, never mind the racists who are calling people animals and all that. Like, we obviously all know in this room we've got to counter that extreme racism which comes out. But it also hurt me to hear people say they felt so sad because they love the city and they felt so sad to see it burn. I'm talking about a burning CVS, right? Like, that makes you sad? Where was your sadness when people's homes were burning because, you know, they didn't have money for fuel in the winter, so they're trying to keep warm, keep their children warm, and keeping their homes warm any way they can. Their houses are catching on fire. The city's cutting police departments, and so some communities aren't going to get service in time. And people's homes are burning, and you didn't care about that. That didn't make you sad about Baltimore. And that just, like, puts me into a rage, because this sudden sadness about Baltimore, you know, everybody thinks that they know something about Baltimore because they've seen The Wire, and that says everything they need to know about Baltimore. But, you know, the love in Baltimore, we all have, people who love Baltimore have, like, this fierce pride about loving Baltimore because everybody else thinks that we're shit, right? Just from watching that. And it's like, yeah, there is a lot of shit. There has been just economic devastation, and there's been crime, there's been drugs, there's been all the things that you see on The Wire. Yes, that's all there. But what kills me is that in the wake of the riots, people are looking at my Baltimore that I love and we love as destroying the Baltimore that they love, the buildings, the stadium, the bars, the windows, the CVS. And there's no acknowledgement that their Baltimore is what has destroyed our Baltimore. All of those things that they love about Baltimore has destroyed the people in Baltimore. And that's really where the blame needs to be placed. So let's talk about the riots, because I hear all kinds of different things, from wild animals senselessly tearing up, setting their own houses on fire. First of all, you know, nobody's setting their own house on fire, right? Nobody lives in the CVS. And I'm pretty sure, you know, people look around and they don't own anything in those neighborhoods. They don't own their homes, right? Like, so to say they're hurting themselves, it's a mirror of what they're now today saying about Freddie Gray, right? He was trying to hurt himself, right? Black people hurt themselves. That's what they do, right? And that narrative is something that we have to take a strong stand against and say, no. We defend people's right to destroy what's hurting them. And it is those institutions. Now, people go the other way, too, and romanticize the riots, and I don't think we want to go that way either. We can't say, like, that is an organized political expression that's going to challenge the system. No. But people have this fear about just acknowledging the anger. Yeah. Either it's got to be senseless, why would they do that to themselves kind of nonsense, or it's got to be, this is the beginning of the revolution, right? It's neither of those things. It's people's anger and desperation, and that's valid. It's completely valid, and it's up to us to say, it's justified. And so I think, you know, that's a point we really wanted to make clear about the riots in particular, because there's all this, you know, good protester, bad protester language trying to divide. And all of that comes down from really, I think, respectability politics, which is so profound in Baltimore because it's easy to look at things through a lens of race, and it's easy to look at things through a lens of class, right? Definitely there's rich and poor in Baltimore, definitely there's black and white, but there's a complex intersection between those things. Yes, we're different from Ferguson because we have black leadership in Baltimore. We have a black mayor, we have a black police commissioner. And so there isn't really racial solidarity that crosses class lines. And that makes this tension of respectability really sort of more intense, I think, in our city than even in other places, because people, you know, black, middle, and upper class people, people with higher positions, black police officers want to separate themselves from the kids who were attacked at Mondawmin and say, you know, they're just wild, crazy animals and that's nothing like us. And then so they want to sort everybody out into who's doing it the legitimate way and who's doing it the illegitimate way. And we have to say, no, it's all legitimate because the system is totally messed up. Yeah, I didn't want to go on and on, but I just wanted to speak very briefly to my experience just speaking as a white person organizing in Baltimore. As an anti-racist, you know, I started out fighting the death penalty, and you know, looking back, a lot of that organization were with coalitions of people who were, there were Quakers, there were, you know, peace activists, there were Catholics, there were all kinds of people involved in the work that we were doing. And I wasn't really thinking about my role as a white person, as an activist in Baltimore, really until I would say Occupy. And that whole experience a few years ago really There's always been lots of divisions on the left in Baltimore, but that experience of Occupy really made it very clear that black organizers and white organizers in the city don't really talk to each other or have the same goals necessarily. And it's something that we all really tried hard to bridge and worked on, but it's something that is still in process and takes a very, very long time because there's very justified reasons for mistrust there, right? So like, you think about Baltimore, there is one organization called Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, and they were talking, yeah, you've heard of them, yeah. So I was at a meeting with them the other day, and they were talking about how they mentioned something like just criticizing the nonprofit industrial complex, and they were like, if the answer to Baltimore's problems was NGOs and nonprofits created and run by white people, if that was the answer, then Baltimore would be a utopia, right? We're full of that, right? And I'm a social worker, like I know the dynamic of all of that. So that's not the answer. And it takes time to build up trust, to organize together. Maybe everyone doesn't have the same exact goals or organize exactly the same way. But you have to show up and be there with each other and build that over time. And the reason that I bring that up is I think people are here because you want to know what you can do, right? We were sitting around my table last night trying to cram in what we could before curfew. And, we were like, what do we want to leave this meeting with? We want to know, I think we want to tell people what they can do. And we think, we're talking, we're like, yeah, the big marches in solidarity are awesome and super inspiring. And having people come down and join big marches in Baltimore like this Saturday, which you should definitely do, is awesome. And, if people want to donate money to legal defense and that kind of thing, that's cool too. But what we really felt that we wanted to see was what real solidarity would look like would be to recognize that this isn't just Baltimore, and it's not just Ferguson. It's happening in every single city. Police brutality is happening in every single city. It's not unique to one department, one city, anything. It's a function of the police. So fight it where you are. And build those relationships with the people who have been fighting it and who have been most affected by it, and realize that they're the ones that need to be taking the lead. So there's an organization, there are definitely like various legal defense funds in Baltimore that you can contribute to. I think there's like Ferguson Legal Defense / Baltimore, something like that. You can find it, or Be More United has a link to it, I think. But there's also an organization that's embedded in Sandtown, Winchester, the neighborhood that Freddie Gray is from and where he was arrested, that's been doing work all along. They're not really recognized, and they don't really want an influx of people trying to do their work with them that they've been trying to do in the community, but they would like support. So they put out a statement today, just kind of making the simple statement, do with, not for, right? And that's No Boundaries Coalition. So that's another organization that if you felt the need to make a donation or something like that, that would be a good one to go to, because they are of the community of Sandtown, Winchester. But there's all different levels of struggle that we all could be involved with. So there's communities, helping their own communities. There's people doing more legislative work, like Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle is really focused on trying to change the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. That has to happen before the Citizens Review Board, which is powerless, can be changed. So like these are legal angles that can be involved with. And then protest has an angle. Riots have a part to play in it too, because it means that people are finally looking at it and paying attention in a way that they never have before. But I don't think we want to say, I hope that happens in my city, right? We don't want to hope that there's another Freddie Gray, certainly. And we don't want to hope for people's communities to be destroyed and under occupation by the police and the National Guard. Believe me, you don't want that. So do the work now that will prevent it. Organize where you are to fight the police where you live. Woo!